Hello, Sarah in Napa. I really apologize for the delay on getting your booster to you. Things were completely out of my hands in terms of the delay, and what the problem was the plating on the steel parts, especially the vacuum can. And people say, well, I don't need it plated. I don't care if it looks pretty. I just want it to work. Well, the reason for the plating is to make sure that the booster works correctly, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. We've got a 190 SL engine we're rebuilding. Anyway, this is what happens with the vacuum can when the booster leaks internally. The brake fluid gets in there and is very caustic and will remove the plating that was there originally. And of course, this is what the booster vacuum can looks like, and along with all these other parts, that's what it looks like when it gets plated with the cadmium plating. And the reason for that is so that we have a smooth, rust-free surface for the vacuum diaphragm to ride inside here, because rust is very abrasive and would tear up the diaphragm internally. Now then, let's go over a few things here. The booster is being tested with .3 brake fluid, and I'm going to seal up the fitting where the fittings go with these plugs. So tell your tech to watch out. Brake fluid may dribble out, and keep it off the car's paint. Your brackets for securing the booster. This plug right here goes in this fitting right here in this hole, and that's a vacuum test port. And this is something that your tech can do there in the shop. And what you do is hook up a vacuum gauge and press on the brakes, and the harder you press on the brakes, the more the vacuum gauge will go to zero, obviously when the car is running. Anyway, I'll be showing you that in a minute in the test. I've got you a rubber grommet that goes down here for the vacuum check valve. Yours was chewed up. These are the fittings that secure your the hollow bolts secure the brass fittings for hooking up the booster. Got new copper washers for you. When installing the booster, you're going to want to install this lower fitting loosely, and then get the booster down in position and secured, and then be able to tighten this fitting, do the final tightening on this lower fitting, because if you try to install it after the booster is installed in the car, there is not enough room to get the hollow bolt in place. So put this one in first loosely, and then you can snug it down towards the end. Now then, this guy goes up the top here, and in order to snug down the bolts and keep the brake fluid from leaking, use another wrench right here on the flats of the slave cylinder to stabilize the slave cylinder while you're wrenching down on this fitting right here. And the reason for that is because oftentimes the torque necessary to seal up the copper washers here will overcome the clamping force of the lock ring right here. So make sure that everything is stabilized when this is taking place, when you're installing all that. Let's see, all the cans have been plated, the vacuum can and all the related steel parts CAD plated, like the original. We've got a rebuilt vacuum check valve assembly, and all new internals. This slave cylinder was sleeved because yours had rust pits in it, so this slave is sleeved with stainless steel. Yes, that's hard to say. Here's your check valve, and we are ready to test. And what you're going to see is, first, our vacuum. These two gauges are tied together so that when the vacuum that is supplied by my vacuum test machine, my booster test machine. In fact, this is what it looks like. So when the vacuum that is supplied by my vacuum pump on my test machine, both these gauges are going to go up and register 20 inches, give or take, whatever the machine can produce. And as the booster is activated, this gauge will stay constant, hence the name, stays constant, and this gauge is going to go down to 0. The harder the brakes are applied, the closer it gets to 0 until you have full application of the brakes, and that gauge is going to read 0. And the application of the brakes is a function of the master cylinder, which is simply my lever right here. On the hydraulic side, we've got the input and the output. This is your input right here and your output coming out of the booster. So these two gauges are tied together, and what happens is this gauge goes up and maxes out, and this gauge reads final input pressure, which is a function of my my master cylinder, which is just this handle right here. Output pressure is, again, these are tied together so that when this gauge goes up and maxes out, this gauge reads final output pressure. Now, most people don't realize that when the booster does not have any vacuum going to it, the booster itself is inert. All it does is simply bypasses fluid internally, just goes in and comes out, and nothing happens to the fluid pressure. So I'm going to demonstrate that by essentially pushing on the brakes with no vacuum. And you'll notice we've got 350 in, 350 out, and 350 out, and the dropping of the fluid is the bypassing of my master cylinder. It's leaking internally, basically. And that's it. The booster is not doing anything. It's just bypassing fluid in and out. So if the booster loses, if you lose boost in terms of vacuum or something like that, you do not lose braking. You just have extra hard braking. And this booster is a 2-to-1 boost ratio. So that's what makes it easier to stop the car. Now, let's go ahead and hit the vacuum, and then we'll test the booster. Down to 0. Vacuum's still constant. Come over here. And you can see our output pressure is close to 900 psi. There we go. Got a good booster. Now, at the same time, we come over here and we look for leaks. Our bleed screws are doing fine. And the only other leak point is going to be right here, where the jam nut is, and that's doing fine. So we're good. We got us a good booster. Cycle it again. Good booster. Do it all at once. There we go. Got a good booster. Let's see, something else I forgot to mention. Yes, the brake light switch. This brake light switch has been installed incorrectly. It's been screwed down all the way to where it's bottomed out. This is not correct. The brake light switch is has tapered threads, and it should only be screwed in far enough to seal when you're braking. And oftentimes you can just screw it in by hand until it seals up, and there should be threads exposed. It should not be screwed down this tight. What that means is that this brass fitting may be expanded such that when this brake light switch is replaced, the new one will not seal properly. So you may have to buy a new one of these fittings. Benz has these. This brake light switch is a common brake light switch, 10x1 thread pitch. You can get it at any auto parts store if you need a new one of those. I was not able to test if your switch is functioning or not. The tech will have to do that himself. Let's see, again, watch out for brake fluid dribbling when the booster is installed, when the test fittings, the transport fittings come off. And you should be ready to rock and roll. Again, thank you very much for your patience, and I really apologize for the delay. It was totally out of my hands, but anyway, we got you a good booster, and I did come in all day Saturday to help you out, so work on it. Thank you. Bye.